Well, welcome to She Can and She Will. And we are being joined today by Eleni, you said, right? Am I say your name right?
Eleni.
And you are a sex intimacy coach, which is very fun because this is a topic we haven't spoken to anyone about yet. So this is going to be a fun and different one for our audience. Before we get too dived in, can you tell us a little bit about you and where you came from and how you got to this whole line of work?
Sure. Yes. So like you said, I'm a sex and intimacy coach for women that experience low libido, especially after having kids. But I'm also a certified sex therapist and a licensed marriage and family therapist. So I have a private practice that I see couples and individuals for sex therapy. And I also have a coaching practice where I do general coaching, but I also specialize in helping women sort of reconnect with their sexual self after having children and sort of, going through the phase of motherhood and finding that combining those two identities. Coming to this work has been, I think, more of a personal healing and self-growth journey for me than anything else. I'm originally from Greece, but I came to the US to do my master's in marriage and family therapy. And then I worked for a couple of years in a community mental health center. My husband, and I decided I'm going to stay home and have my children and raise them. So I took a break from being a therapist, and then sort of I started living life as a married woman myself, having my 3 children and being a stay-at-home mom. And the time came where I started to kind of, my husband and I had, gotten into that phase of life, being busy, and each one of us had our own roles. Things started to feel challenging in our relationship, especially for me in this area of, when I'm helping women now, I went through myself. When the time came to go, I was ready to go back to work. I was like, I have to do this. I started to feel unhappy being at home. So I went back to, I decided I was going to start my private practice because it was the only thing that made sense so I can make my own schedule and still be available to, I have 3 young kids. So I decided I was going to work with couples because that's what I needed help with at the time. And I wanted to understand how to help myself. So I started training after training and got into the couples therapy endeavor. And then very quickly it became evident that sex was a big part of this, the talk around sex. And I didn't feel very confident myself because I also was struggling with my own low libido and with my own kind of transition into motherhood and trying to fit it all in. So I decided I was going to learn more about how to talk about sex in therapy. And that was the one thing. And the other thing that made it so obvious, the need for more education for me personally around this area, was the fact that, couples go to couples therapy because obviously they're struggling in their relationship, but a big part of what's also going on is they hope that they will go to couples therapy, improve their connection and communication, and that's going to help their sexual life. That's gonna transition and trickle into their sex life, and then sort of all is gonna be better. And they really don't go to couples therapy to talk about their sexual struggles. Unless you ask, you will never know. Mm-hmm. So it's not really true that, there is some truth to your sexual relationship improving when you have a better connection, but those two are actually quite separate. They depend really on each person individually and their relationship with their sexual self, their level of sexual confidence, and what they both bring to the table. So that's how the decision to become a certified sex therapist came about, because it was necessary for me to be able to help my couples, but to also figure out a way for this for myself. From that on, then just the life coaching became part of it, because it just allows me to reach more people, and I'm not bound by my mental health license as a coach.
Okay, so I find this all very fascinating because I feel like a lot of us have gone through this, and a little bit, this was partially what led to my divorce was a big problem. And I think that happens with a lot of people, especially once you have kids, you go to, like, you're not interested anymore. And how do you help people acknowledge that and work past that? That's a hard thing, because if you're not in the mood, how do you get in the mood? Is that something you can just make happen?
Yes and no. So there is a way you can make it happen when you understand how your female body works and how female sexual desire works. So there is that part that has to do with understanding more how that works, which is what I help, right? And I'll tell you in a minute. But also there is that other part that has to do with our relationship with sex in general, coming out of a society that gives us very conflicting messages around this issue of sex, right? First of all, there is lack of appropriate and sufficient sex education. So kids get this: sex is bad, you gotta protect yourself, don't do it, don't get pregnant, don't get sick. Sort of that's what they learn. They don't learn about the pleasurable side of sex and how to actually use it to love themselves more. Okay. So there is just this conflicting information, like it's dangerous, you should control it, you should be careful. But then again, you also should be sexy and you should like it, and you don't like it too much, because if you like it too much, you might be a little bit of a slut. But there's just, this kind of confusion around what one should think about sex, especially women now, right? So coming out, this is one aspect that we just grow up with, and we kind of never really address or go deeper into unless we have to. So then we get into this new relationship, and we have these great feelings and thoughts about this one person, and we feel it's reciprocated. So we open up to the idea of sex as part of this interchange between us and that other person, and we have positive thoughts and feelings about it. And as things settle, and as the dust settles, and we transition into a long-term committed relationship, and we have more, let's call it, for lack of a better word, negative interactions, where there is conflict, there is friction, there is, just the novelty wears off. And now we start to have other thoughts about this person, like, well, it doesn't feel the same. And now all these other thoughts and beliefs about sex and ourselves in this relationship with that other person start to come up, like, well, makes sense what I'm trying to say here? They start to come up and they get triggered, and then it's one of that unresolved, let's say, confusion starts to resurface, and it starts to look like anxiety and sort of like being in your head about sex, and when should I have it, and who am I having it for, and what's a good time for me to, how many weeks in between. All of that anxiety that was kind of always there, like questions that we never answered growing up, they just come up. And it looks like anxiety, and it feels like disconnect, and it kills our libido. Okay?
I feel also like once you become a mom, there's so much going on that you start scheduling. Okay, Monday night is when we're going to have sex. And once that starts to happen, then Monday night comes and you're not in the mood. And then another whole week will go by, and it's, I don't feel like that's super healthy either. Like, how do you, I know you work with couples, but do you sometimes feel like it's one person more than the other? I feel almost like as a woman, you're scheduling, the kids are doing this, you're doing that, everything's, all this stuff is going on. Whereas the guy is just like, okay, let's do it. And
yes. But that's part of how we're raised, right? We're raised to be caretakers. We're raised to do, everything for everyone. And we never get to really think what we want. And that goes both ways in life in general, but also in our sexual, experience. So that's part of what you're like, all of a sudden becomes so evident. Like, what about me? Like, I just can do it all. But the other thing that I think it's important, Marianne, to kind of go back and incorporate in this discussion is this idea that I should feel horny before I decide I'm going to have sex. And what I mean by that is, this is just one way sexual desire looks like. It feels like sexual excitement and horniness. There is another kind of sexual desire that is misunderstood. I'm talking about responsive sexual desire, which is what happens once you start engaging sexually. I get it all the time from women in my practice. They're like, well, I don't feel like doing it. It's sort of like going to the gym. I don't feel like doing it. But once we get into it, I feel, I'm getting into it and then I have a good time, but it's just not there to begin with. And they think that's a problem because they remember those days that was there and I want it to be like that. Mm-hmm. I don't want to have to try, which is part of the lack of sufficient education. What I'm saying here is that we actually have this kind of responsive sexual desire that if we understand as equally normal and healthy as spontaneous desire, we can then decide when we're going to be willing to let it happen or not. But of course, then what you just described comes into play, right? What will help you be willing to let it happen? If you feel stretched thin and overly stressed, chances are that's not going to be the case. You're not going to feel willing to become aroused and let the sexual play happen so that maybe you feel sexual desire or maybe not. And then if you're not, how do you communicate that to your partner? That's the sexual anxiety, right? How do I say no when I'm trained to say yes? How do I handle those emotions? How do I set a boundary between what I want and what I like and what I know my partner wants and likes? And so we always have that voice that in a way that we feel good about. So we end up, it all starts to look like I'm just going to avoid it. I'm just going to keep busy with other things. And then the cycle of sexual avoidance starts. The disconnect starts. And then what happens is we feel disconnected and we think that's why we don't want to have sex. And that's half the truth because we also resist the connection because when the connection happens, then the sex is on the table again. So whatever attempt our partner makes to connect with us, we think it's because they want to have sex, which is an immediate turnoff. Like, well, you don't do this. You're not doing this because you care about me. You're doing this because you want to have sex. And then there goes the sexual sort of anxiety. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Yep. I know exactly what you're talking about. I have experienced
it's so universal.
That actually.
It's so universal.
Do you have a few tips that you can tell us that you would give someone that wants to be able to, you feel like you got to get your groove back is what it sort of feels like. The urge just isn't there. I know stress is a lot of it too. Is there a way that you can, what are some ways that you help people? What are some top level ways that you help people?
So I think the first step is to identify what you think gets in the way. Okay. Because just saying I don't feel sexual desire, it's sort of, one of the, let's say, realizations or, something that happens. But if I asked you, Marianne, if I had a magic wand and I gave you all the sexual desire there is, would there be anything else that would be stopping you from having sex with your partner, from wanting to have sex?
For me, I think one of the biggest things is I feel like there's kids always in the house. And that
privacy?
Yes. Like not being walked in on or heard is also probably a big.
Mm-hmm. So lack of privacy is one. Okay. Anything else? And you don't have to become personal here, but you can give me thoughts or ideas that you might have about women in general, not just you personally. I don't want to put you on the spot.
I think in general, women are, another one would just be, your mind is so full of other things. Your brain, your head has to be in it, I feel like, in order to really get in the mood. And if you're thinking about, okay, I got to go to the grocery store. So not being able to get your head into it.
Not being able to get your head into it. And why is that a problem? Say you're not able to get your head into it.
Then you don't really enjoy it. You don't get there.
That's right. Okay. It's not enjoyable. Okay. And if sex is not enjoyable for whatever reason, it decreases your chances of wanting it. So one way to go about it is to figure out how you can make sex more enjoyable. Okay. Because then there's more room for sexual desire to happen. People want the sexual desire to be there first, as if then if they have it, that's the end of the story. But that's not true. There's so many reasons why that sexual desire is not there. And 85% of them are not your hormones.
Mm-hmm.
It's your thoughts about what's going on, what else should be going on instead, right? I can't do it because of privacy. I'll give you some of the other reasons that I hear very often. Mm-hmm. Body image is huge. Body image is huge. I don't like being naked. Okay. I don't like my body. I don't feel good in my, I don't like being naked or how I look. So immediately, if you don't like the way you, let's say, exist in yourself, chances are you're not going to want to share that with somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
So if I gave you all the desire that there is, you might not use it anyways, because the reason why you struggle with sex, not to you personally, but is not just the lack of sexual desire. There's so much other, let's call it mental baggage that attaches to it and to our ability to receive pleasure and give pleasure and just relax and enjoy. That makes it so, libido just is like, okay, I'll stand back here and I'll wait for you to, you can handle all that. Maybe I'll show up. Doesn't it?
So do you work with people to try to get past all of like the body image, the stress problems? Do you work with them to get past all of that so that they can move ahead?
Yes. So the first step is really developing awareness of what the hell gets in the way, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you did have the libido, what else would get in the way? Yes, your body image. Yes, timing and lack of privacy. How about that resentment toward your partner? Because da-da-da-da-da-da-da. How about all the things that then, for me, Marianne, it was before I met my husband. Okay. For me, it was this kind of thought, you have to love me first.
Right.
Okay. It was a belief. It was a thought. I was kind of, raised that sex otherwise is, I don't want to call it dirty, but not. You shouldn't be having it unless somebody loves you. Okay. Yeah. Well, I couldn't decide if somebody loved me or not, because when they were mad, does that mean they love me or not? They don't love me. When they were nice because they loved me, or were they nice because they wanted sex from me? So I ended up having sex to be liked and to feel loved. And then I was doubting my own decision or the outcome. I shouldn't have done this. It wasn't like I had this internal conflict, but this thought that you should love me before I have sex was my own. That I didn't decide it. It sort of got, the seed came there, and then it sort of grew and grew and grew. And until I addressed it and took responsibility for how I want to think about this differently, and do I want to continue having that thought, and how it gets in my own way? Because, okay, if I can make a decision, somebody loves me or they don't, then I can decide, am I going to have sex or not? But if I keep changing my mind, that was for me. So if the most important step is to identify what are those thoughts that really are lose-lose situations for us, that we put ourselves in unconsciously because of how we are raised and how we grow up and how we're educating ourselves through pornography, we're educating ourselves through peers, just so much wrong information that we base our beliefs around sex. And then that just impacts our desire, lack of desire for it. So that's a big step. I help people, especially women, identify that. And in a way, re-examine their thoughts and beliefs about sex, re-decide consciously what they want to believe. And some of those thoughts, they decide they're going to keep them, right? But at least, it's a conscious decision that you're making to believe this thing about sex that is impacting how you relate to it. And then what do you want to do with that? How do you want to communicate that to a partner? How do you want to be okay with that and not fight yourself about it? Okay. So that's this is a part of the coaching now, right? Because this is actually hardwired. It's part of now what our brain thinks is a survival mechanism. And it's hardwired. It keeps coming back and keeps coming back. And until you talk about it enough time and you develop a strong awareness, it keeps creeping in when you don't want it. So that's the coaching part. The coaching part has to do with just like developing enough awareness that now it becomes painful to see that the beliefs that you have about yourself, about your body, about whatever, are not serving you. And, it's actually, there's things you can do about it. So this is the process. This is part of the process. And the other part is really educating people and women about sexual desire, responsive, spontaneous, debunking sexual myths. The fact, for example, that sexual desire is a drive. It's not true. I mean, there's hormones related to it, but if people can have orgasms in their sleep, the mind is the biggest sex organ.
Yes,
rather,
it is
rather
really.
than our body parts. And what happens in the mind is crucial.
So when you work with people, are you working always with couples, or do you start with a couple, then maybe you figure out that you have to work with them individually and then come together? How do people work with you, and how do people reach out if they're listening and they want to work with you?
I only offer couples and sex therapy in the state of New York because that's where I'm licensed, and I can practice anywhere else. So yes, I have two businesses. Like I said, I don't see couples in my coaching practice. I see men and women that, like I said, general life coaching and transitional coaching and all of that. But specifically for women with low libido after having kids that want to kind of stop stressing about sex and just like feel better about themselves. Is that what you're asking? I have a website.
Yep.
My website is newintimacy.com. And there's a lot of, kind of a little bit more information about this. My email address is eleni@newintimacy.com. And I explain some of this process for me personally in my website. I have my personal story there. I offer, if the group coaching is developing now. Up until now, I've been offering one-on-one coaching in like an 8-week program where we get to sort of touch on one topic each week, whatever. Of course, I have my thoughts and ideas of what comes up for women most of the time, but it's very sort of customized to each, personalized to each woman's specific needs. And then I have a group that's developing for women that want to address this, and it's more like a group coaching online rather than one-on-one.
That seems like that would have a lot of following, because I think this could help a lot of people, even just hearing what you're saying and knowing that it's not necessarily that you have a low libido. It's that your mind is not there in the right place because of other things.
And it's really not your fault.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
It's just, you can't tell when it started.
Mm-hmm.
And it's
Mm-hmm.
just, you're not really aware of it. It's all unconscious. It's just there because we never encouraged to think about it. Okay. We know we're thinking about it all the time. It's like there and it's like, oh, what if, but it's so time and energy consuming and so heavy on women's hearts and minds that, it's heartbreaking. I know how it was for
It
me,
is.
how much joy it sucks out of your life in general and your confidence and your ability to kind of feel good about yourself and just stop ruminating.
Yes. Because you want to go back to that feeling that you had back when you were dating. And it's hard to get your head back to that spot when everything else life happens.
It is, and it's not, because there's so many things that you can do once you identify that, for example, based on what you said, right? We want to go back to where things were. You were doing so many things differently than what you're doing now.
Mm-hmm.
That perhaps if you started doing some of those things now, you would see that you have more chances of experiencing desire. I'm talking about, the way you took care of yourself back then,
Mm-hmm.
the way you prepared for sexual intimacy back then. Now it's like, okay, we're in our
I'm
pajamas
all
all day.
covered in, I'm in my pajamas covered in baby puke. Huh.
Right? That's how is that sexual desire going to develop? Right? But if you were showered and you were shaved and you had some time to kind of pick what you're going to wear and you felt kind of like, you smelled good, like maybe, maybe,
That's very true. I
but,
like it.
but, so it's also so like the other way around that we don't get to imagine. Because it's not, nobody puts the thought there that, well, let's see what happens if you do this. Because we wrongfully believe that sexual desire needs to be there to begin with. And then that thought just gets in the way of attempting anything to help ourselves just feel sexual.
I like this. This is a very interesting conversation. I like it a lot. I'm going to put all of your info in the show notes. Anybody's in New York. So you're based out of New York City. Are you a live in-person coach or do you do online?
Right. For the coaching, it's happening more online.
Okay.
For people that I live in Rochester, New York, I do have local coaching clients. And of course, so there is also like a therapy website, which is betterrelationship.org. But right now I'm not accepting any, like my practice is full.
Okay.
I do have coaching clients, right? And, for the people that, if anyone hears this podcast and tells me that they got my name from your cast, I'm offering a free session, a free coaching session to sort of see what this is about and to have that first step of kind of, is this even for me? Kind of like it's a free session. And then I'm going to also send you a link to a free masterclass for your audience on how to spark sexual desire and how to sort of explore turn-ons and turn-offs and what's that all about? Like, get you going.
Okay. And I'll put that link in the show notes. And do people for the coaching also have to be in New York in order to do the coaching?
No. That's the beauty of coaching, right? It's not,
awesome.
There's no boundaries there. It can be international. It can be,
awesome. That's perfect.
I have clients, from all over the US. So no worries there.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Eleni, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me, Marianne. It was wonderful.